Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. How are you? Have a good day, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, now we will come to today's news. There was a big debate last night between Ron DeSantis and Charlie Crist. He got very heated. Brought to Sands is right now in the polls as absolutely clocking Charlie Crist. This was a purple state. Ron DeSantis beat Andrew Gillum, an alleged gay meth addict who was now under indictment by the DOJ for corruption. He beat him by 30,000 votes, like 301,000 in a very large state, Florida. He is now leading in the polls, according to Real Clear Politics polling averages, by 10 points. The latest polls, as two separate ones, Mason-Dixon and Florida Atlantic University, have just hand sub 11. The reason for that is specifically because he did not shut down the state. It's because he reopened the state fast. He attempted to make sure that people didn't lose their businesses. How bad is this for Democrats? It's so bad that Charlie Crist has to just lie about. He actually tweeted out last week, quote, "Governor DeSantis is the only governor in Florida history who shut down the schools and locked down businesses, which is just unbelievable gaslighting. I mean, he was the like at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone did. Would that be what you're talking about? Because Ron DeSantis is actually quite famous for reopening the state of Florida. The media made him their bugaboo. He was the worst. Andrew Cuomo was the hero. Andrew Cuomo is here to do three things: kill elderly people, grab ass, and shut down the economy. And he achieved all three of those things before he was booted from office. Ron DeSantis actually didn't do any of those things. He didn't shut down the economy. He didn't grab house. He didn't kill all the seniors in Florida. And Ron DeSantis is now a wildly popular governor of what used to be a purple state, but it's now pretty obviously a significantly red state. You know what change that will change? That was Ron DeSantis, his COVID response. If you look at his approval ratings, it was his COVID response that really launched him into the stratosphere, politically speaking. Here's Ron DeSantis' debate last night talking about it. "Everyone listen to this," he said. "You mentioned, Liz, that people are flocking to Florida. That would not have happened if Charlie Crist had his way. He wrote me a letter in July of 2020, saying you need to shut down the state of Florida. He said you need to force people to shelter in their own homes. That would have destroyed the state of Florida. That would have caused our tourism industry to go into the toilet. It would have locked out millions of kids from school. I rejected Charlie Crist's lockdown letter. I kept his state open, and I kept the state free." Okay, that is the Sands his big claim to fame. It also happens to be the reason why Ron DeSantis, who's now winning a majority of Hispanic voters in the state of Florida, and we want to talk about stats that just scare the living hell out of Democrats and Republicans, start winning a majority of Hispanic voters, they got a real problem. According to Florida Politics.com, DeSantis now leads Charlie Crist 5,144 among Hispanics. That's a Telemundo poll by 7 points. That's not even a slight majority. That's a significant majority. Those poll results flipped fortunes from just 4 years ago for Republicans among Hispanics, according to CNN exit polling from 2018. And we go on to 54% of Latino vote against a census 44% of the vote that year. The census strength comes largely from those with Cuban backgrounds who hate communism, and therefore don't like what the Democrats are pitching. Crist leads other Hispanics by a fairly wide margin. But DeSantis has the support of 56% of Hispanics were born in another country, and 48% of Hispanics born in the United States. Among Hispanic independents, DeSantis enjoys a 56-34 lead. The reason for all of this, the reason DeSantis is running away with this race, is again because he had his own experts that he went to when it came to whether to shut down the state or whether to mandate vaccines or whether to forcibly mask children. This is the reason he's doing so well. MSNBC is freaking out about this as well. They should be. There was MSNBC highlighting that poll result for Ron DeSantis yesterday. And this is some big news. This was from MSNBC, your precious narrative, your precious, carefully crafted Democrat narrative. The only way that narrative stays intact is if you protect it. If you let the truth come in, if you let people ask real questions, and if you let people challenge your narrative openly and honestly, well, then your narrative crumbles. It'll all come crashing down like a damn landslide. And that's exactly what just happened on MSNBC, bringing on a bunch of Pittsburgh Trump supporters, of course doing election coverage in the most important state ahead of the 2022 midterms. And this poor little MSNBC reporter tried to steer the conversation in the direction of January 6th, clearly, in an effort to make Trump supporters look extreme and look like terrible human beings ahead of the election, and boy, did it backfire and backfire badly, because here's the thing: of a left always have, especially on this issue, as emotion, a narrative that blows things out of proportion, a narrative that misrepresents the actual events on that day. Nothing but exaggeration in fear-mongering, love democracy, mud democracy, mud democracy. But what right-wingers have on this issue is nuanced research details, and men, did they tear apart this leftist narrative live on TV on MSNBC? Absolutely. Volleyball spiking every single question from this dishonest left-wing hack of a journalist in the most glorious of fashion. Let me show you guys exactly what happened in this epic viral moment, which who knows might have even been convincing to some of the more honest MSNBC viewers. Alright, folks. So like I said earlier, it should have just left it alone. You crafted your little leftist narrative. Your MSNBC viewers bought it hook, line, and sinker. It shouldn't have let nuance and facts enter the room. And that hit the nail right on the head, because almost every single individual there on that day was peaceful. Were there agitators in the crowd? Absolutely. Was there a mob mentality effect that took over the crowd? Absolutely. Did it devolve into something that it probably shouldn't have? Absolutely. But based on all of the video evidence that we have seen thus far, there was almost no violence. Most of the violence in the clips that we see left-wingers constantly linking all over the place is coming as a direct response to Capitol Police officers engaging with the protesters. The idea that it was all one-sided is terribly dishonest. In fact, most of what we hear from the left when it comes to January 6th is completely dishonest. It's all narrative used to fear-monger to score cheap political points heading into an election, and that's why it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And that's why this journalist looks so terrible. No Capitol Police officer died. The only people who lost their lives on the day were protesters, as one of the individuals said. She then goes on to say, well, oh, a Capitol Police officer lost his life. Yes, but due to medical reasons. And Brian Sick Nick, I believe, suffered a stroke a day or two later. Anybody who knows the basic facts pertaining to this topic would know that nobody talks about Ashley Babbitt, an unarmed peaceful protester who was viciously gunned down by the U.S. government for the crime of crawling through a window. What's more outrageous? Angry people who are trying to have their voices heard by walking into the Capitol in protest, or the vicious killing of Ashley Babbitt? To me, it seems pretty damn clear. And another point raised by an individual participating is the issue of how January 6th defendants are being treated. People with misdemeanor charges, people who merely existed on January 6th, being held in captivity, being held in solitary confinement without bail, being treated like political prisoners, being treated like terrorists by their own government for peacefully protesting. Was the overall protest totally peaceful? Absolutely not. But most individuals, and a whole lot of individuals who are currently being held in solitary confinement, were absolutely being peaceful. They were exercising their right to assemble, their constitutional right to assemble. It just happened to be in the Capitol, and their rights are currently being violated by this DOJ, by this regime. And we're supposed to be outraged over the actions of imperfect human beings who are frustrated and who are protesting, rather than being frustrated of the U.S. government and their total disregard for human life and constitutional rights. Please give me a break. Boy, did this backfire, just like January 6th has been backfiring. I don't know why leftists won't just let it go. It's a losing issue for you. You spent millions upon millions of dollars on campaign ads, media coverage, and a January 6th kangaroo court committee, and it's netted you nothing, absolute zilch, nada, zero, yet you continue to do it thinking it's going to yield different results. Wake up, leftwards, it's not going to happen. The American people are not buying it anymore. It started off as something that you could have had both sides come together on. You know, right-wingers have condemned the violent acts, the writing of the day, unequivocally across the board over and over again, from small, independent commentators like me all the way to the former President of the United States. It could have been a moment of healing. It could have been a moment of actually listening and mending deep divisive issues in American culture. But instead, lefties decided that they were going to politicize it, that they were going to castigate the other side as being domestic terrorists. They were going to try to use it to pursue totally ridiculous criminal charges against the former President of the United States, completely misrepresent his statements, persecute him with their ridiculous committee, and not even allow him a legal defense. They decided they were going to make it a political issue to benefit them ahead of the next elections. And while there is some outrage when it comes to January 6th, I think people are more outraged by the constant politicization, the total dishonesty of the left, and the lengths that they are willing to go to get their power or get their hands on power. That to me is clear. And it seems as though the only people who don't get it are the self-righteous, dishonest Democrats, and it keeps backfiring in their faces as they refuse to take a hint and learn a lesson. This isn't the winning issue that you think it is. Mrs. Fancy mainstream MSNBC journalist gets owned on the issue of January 6th by a bunch of regular Americans, because the only difference is here those regular Americans are able to apply nuance, and at least to be honest when talking about this issue, where the left boy journalist operates in a world of dishonest narrative, and that to me seems incredibly clear. Thank you very much. WWG1WGA. Give me your thoughts below and hit